on a cool and quiet night when the moon was shining through the curtains and the whole house seemed fast asleep. Samuel and Theo were lying in their bedroom, tucked warmly under their blankets. Samuel, who was 9 years old, was lying in his bed by the window. Theo, who was only 2, was in his little bed nearby, holding his favorite plush toy tightly against his chest. The room was peaceful. A small night lamp glowed softly on the dresser. The curtains moved just a little whenever the wind touched the window. And from somewhere far away in the house came the tiny, sleepy sounds that old houses sometimes make at night. Samuel stared at the ceiling. Theo blinked slowly at the moonlight. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Theo whispered, very quietly, "Samuel?" Samuel turned his head. "Yeah?" Theo hugged his plush toy a little tighter. "Did you hear that?" Samuel listened. At first, he heard nothing but the soft movement of the curtains. Then, very faintly, from somewhere in the room, came a strange little sound. It was not loud. It was not sharp. It was just a small, soft sound, like a whisper. Samuel pushed himself up a little on one elbow. "What was that?" he whispered back. Theo shook his head. "I don't know." The room seemed quieter than before now. Even the moonlight felt different somehow. Samuel looked around. The toy shelf stood against the wall, lined with books, blocks, and little figures. The dresser stood beneath the night lamp. A chair in the corner held a folded sweater. Everything looked normal. Everything looked fine. Then, again, the sound came. A soft whisper, very light, very quick. Samuel sat up straighter. Theo's eyes grew wider. "I heard it again," Theo said. "So did I," Samuel whispered. For one moment, Samuel thought about calling for Mom. But then he looked at Theo, who was small and sleepy and trying very hard to be brave. Samuel took a slow breath. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'll check." Theo immediately sat up, too. "I'm coming." Samuel gave him a look. It might be nothing. Theo nodded seriously and held up his plush toy. "I have him." Samuel smiled a little. "Okay, then come on." The boys climbed out of bed. The floor felt cool under their feet. The moonlight stretched long, pale shapes across the room. Samuel took one small step, then another. Theo followed close behind, clutching his plush toy, and staying so close that he almost stepped on Samuel's pajama leg. The whisper did not come again right away. That almost made it worse. The room felt like it was waiting. Samuel looked toward the curtains first. They moved softly in the moonlight. Nothing was there. He looked under the desk. Nothing. He looked toward the toy shelf. Everything was still. Theo whispered, "Maybe it came from the closet." Samuel turned slowly toward the closet door. It was closed. The moonlight touched one side of it, but the rest was in shadow. The whisper came again. This time it sounded just a little closer. Theo made a tiny sound and pressed against Samuel's arm. Samuel swallowed. He did not want Theo to know. He was scared too. So he straightened his shoulders and said, as bravely as he could, "Let's look." Together they walked toward the closet, step by step, slowly. Theo's plush toy brushed against his pajama sleeve as he walked. The house was quiet. The room was quiet. Samuel reached out his hand toward the closet handle. For 1 second, he stopped. Theo looked up at him. Samuel looked back. Then he turned the handle. Very slowly, the closet door opened. Inside were hanging jackets, a small backpack, a box on the floor, and shadows between the clothes. Samuel stared. Theo stared too. Nothing jumped out. Nothing moved. Theo let out a tiny breath. Maybe it wasn't the closet. Samuel nodded. He was about to close the door when he noticed something odd. At the very back of the closet, beyond the hanging clothes, a very faint silver glow flickered for a moment. It was small, very small, but it was there. "Did you see that?" Samuel whispered. Theo nodded fast. Before either of them could move, the glow vanished. Then the whisper came again. But this time, it did not sound like a voice. It sounded more like air moving through something small, or the soft turning of something old. Samuel frowned. "That doesn't sound mean," he whispered. Theo blinked. No. Samuel carefully pushed the hanging jackets aside. Behind them, near the back wall of the closet, sat a small old music box they had not seen in a long time. It had once belonged to their grandmother. It was silver and blue, shaped like a little moon. And now, in the quiet dark of the closet, it was glowing faintly. Theo's mouth opened in surprise. The moon box. Samuel remembered it now. Their mother had put it away months ago. "It wasn't glowing before," Samuel whispered. The little music box gave another soft sound, like a tiny breath of wind slipping through its cracks. Then, all at once, the room grew cooler. Not cold, just cooler. The kind of cool that comes when a cloud passes in front of the moon. The boys slowly turned around. The bedroom looked different. Not wrong, just different. The shadows were deeper now. The moonlight looked brighter. And near the far wall, where the pale light touched the floor, stood a tall shape. Theo clutched his plush toy tightly. Samuel froze. The shape took 1 step forward into the moonlight. It was Freddy, but not scary Freddy, not angry Freddy. This Freddy looked calm and quiet, almost like a guardian standing watch in the night. His eyes were gentle. His black top hat caught the silver moonlight. He lifted one paw slowly, as if to say, "Do not be afraid." Samuel's heart was beating hard, but somehow, when he looked at Freddy, he did not feel danger. He felt watched over. Then, near the bookshelf, another shape appeared. Bonnie stepped softly out of the shadow beside the books, carrying his guitar on his back. He did not make a sound. He only gave the boys a quiet nod. By the dresser, where the warm lamp glowed, Chica appeared next. She looked gentle too, her face calm, her posture relaxed, as though she had been there the whole time, waiting for the room to settle. And at the curtain, where the moonlight moved like silver water, Foxy became visible at last, half in light and half in shadow, quiet and still, not wild at all. Theo pressed close to Samuel and whispered, "They're here." Samuel nodded slowly. Freddy looked toward the glowing music box in the closet. Then he looked back at Samuel and Theo. It was as if he was asking them to understand. Samuel took a small step toward the closet again. "The music box," he whispered. "I think that's what made the sound." Bonnie gave the tiniest nod. Chica looked toward Theo's plush toy. Foxy tilted his head toward the window, where the moonlight shone brighter now. Samuel carefully reached into the closet and picked up the little moon-shaped music box. It felt cool in his hands. It was not broken, but the tiny turning key on the back had come loose and was slowly moving on its own, just enough to make that soft whispering sound. Theo looked at it in wonder. It was just the music box. Samuel looked around the room. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy were still there in the moonlight, silent and calm. "Maybe," Samuel said softly, "but maybe they came to help us, not be scared." Theo thought about that. Then he gave a tiny nod. "I like that." Samuel turned the little key gently. The music box opened. For a second, there was silence. Then a soft lullaby began to play. It was the gentlest tune either of them had ever heard. Not loud, not sad, just soft and sleepy and warm. As the music filled the room, something magical happened. The shadows softened. The silver moonlight became gentle again. The curtains moved peacefully. Even the air in the room felt warmer. Theo smiled. Samuel smiled too. And when they looked up again, Freddy was slowly fading into the moonlight by the wall. Bonnie's shape grew softer by the bookshelf. Chica became part of the warm glow near the dresser. Foxy faded beside the curtain, like a quiet reflection disappearing from glass. In just a few moments, the room looked normal again. The lamp glowed softly. The moon shone through the curtains. The music box played its tiny lullaby. Theo let out a slow, sleepy breath. "They were nice," he whispered. Samuel nodded. "Yeah, I think they were guarding the room." Theo looked down at his plush toy. "And helping him too." Samuel laughed quietly. Then he carried the music box to the dresser and set it carefully beside the lamp. Theo climbed back into bed. Samuel tucked him in a little more and pulled the blanket up to his shoulders. Theo's eyes were already growing heavy. "Samuel," he mumbled. "Yeah? If the whisper comes back tomorrow." Samuel smiled and climbed back into his own bed. "Then we'll know it's not something bad." Theo's fingers relaxed around the plush toy. "It's just the moon box," he whispered. "And maybe Freddy and the others," Samuel said softly. Theo gave one tiny, sleepy nod. The music box continued to play. The room stayed calm. The moonlight rested on the floor like a pale blanket. And as the night grew quieter and quieter, Samuel listened to Theo's gentle breathing and the soft lullaby from the little silver box. Everything was safe. Everything was peaceful. Everything was exactly as it should be. And from that night on, whenever the room made a strange little sound in the dark, Samuel and Theo remembered the whisper in the bedroom, the glowing moonbox, and the silent figures who had stood in the moonlight like kind night guardians. So they were never quite as afraid of nighttime sounds again. Because now they knew that sometimes, in quiet rooms, under silver moonlight, a whisper is not a warning. Sometimes it is only the sound of bedtime magic waking up. The end.